boy with one leg lives in a landfill, but his kindness changes the life of a wealthy woman. Ethan's mornings always started the same. Before the first rays of sunlight could stretch across the horizon, the harsh sound of metal cans clattering in the wind would pull him from sleep. He lived in the landfill, a sprawling wasteland of discarded objects and forgotten lives, where the line between survival and despair was razor-thin. Ethan didn't need an alarm clock. The chaos around him ensured he never slept too deeply. He shared a cramped, makeshift shack with his mom, Maria, and his little sister, Lily. The shack was more a fragile patchwork of hope than a home, pieced together with old tarps, rusted sheets of tin, and the resolve of a family clinging to each other. At 13, Ethan had seen more of life's cruelty than most would in an entire lifetime. His leg, lost in an accident he could never forget, was a daily reminder of how quickly life could take a turn for the worse. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the kind of pain that lingered in his heart, a shadow that followed him every step he took on his battered crutch, a crutch he had painstakingly crafted from a broken broomstick and duct tape he scavenged from the piles of trash surrounding them. His mother's voice, hoarse from the relentless cough that plagued her, broke through the morning stillness. "Ethan, can you help Lily?" Maria's eyes carried the weight of 1,000 silent battles. The air was damp, the smell of rotting garbage seeping through every crack of their tiny shelter, making it impossible to ignore the reality they faced. Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, his body aching from another restless night on the cold, hard dirt floor. He prepared a simple tea, the only thing they had left, and handed it to his mother with a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks, Ethan," Maria whispered, her voice heavy with exhaustion and gratitude. Lily, just 8 years old, lay curled up on a thin, torn mattress in the corner. Her small frame seemed to shrink more with each passing day, her breath shallow and labored. Ethan's chest tightened every time he looked at her. She didn't deserve this. No one did. But Ethan didn't dwell on the unfairness of their situation. He couldn't afford to. There was no time for self-pity when survival demanded every ounce of strength he had. He gently stroked his sister's feverish forehead, silently vowing to find a way to help her. Her medicine was running out, and Maria's voice echoed in his mind, filled with worry. "She needs those pills, Ethan. I don't know how much longer she can hold on without them." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat and steeled himself. He had no choice. He'd face the landfill, find something valuable, anything, and trade it for the medicine Lily needed. As he stepped outside, the biting wind hit his face, carrying with it the cacophony of crows and the distant hum of machines digging through the trash. The ground beneath his single foot was uneven, treacherous, but Ethan's determination never wavered. Every painful step forward was driven by a singular thought: I can't fail her. Ethan wasn't just a boy navigating a harsh world. He was a protector, a fighter, and, above all, a symbol of hope in a place where hope was hard to come by. The marketplace buzzed with life as Ethan limped through the crowded streets, gripping his makeshift crutch tightly. The smell of grilled food mixed with the scent of sweat and dirt, a cruel reminder of what he couldn't afford. The clamor of vendors, shouting over one another, filled the air, each trying to outdo the next in their quest to sell their goods. Ethan had walked miles from the landfill to reach the market, the pain in his leg a constant reminder of his reality. But his focus remained sharp. He had to find something, anything, that could be traded for the medicine his sister so desperately needed. As he scanned the bustling scene, his gaze locked onto a small child, no older than 4, standing alone in the middle of the chaos. Her clothes were tattered, her face streaked with dirt, and tears streamed silently down her cheeks. She clutched a stuffed bear missing one eye, the only thing tethering her to a sense of security in a world that seemed intent on swallowing her whole. Ethan felt a pang in his chest, a pain deeper than any he'd felt in his injured leg. He knew that look too well, the look of someone lost and helpless. Without hesitation, he made his way through the crowd toward her. His crutch made his approach uneven, but his determination was unwavering. "Hey there," he said, kneeling with difficulty to meet her eye level. His voice was soft, comforting. "Are you okay? Where's your family?" The little girl didn't answer, her lips quivering as she held the bear tighter. Ethan's heart ached. He knew he had no resources to spare, but leaving her there alone wasn't an option. Digging into his pocket, he pulled out the few coins he had managed to collect. It wasn't much, barely enough to buy a single meal, but he didn't think twice. He walked to the nearest food stall and exchanged the coins for a piece of bread and a small carton of juice. Returning to the girl, he handed her the food with a gentle smile. "Here, eat this. It'll help." For a moment, she hesitated, her wide, tear-filled eyes looking at him with a mix of fear and gratitude. Then hunger won, and she devoured the bread as if it were the best meal she'd ever tasted. As she ate, Ethan sat beside her, leaning heavily on his crutch. "You know," he began, his voice light and full of warmth, "there was once a brave knight who got lost in a big, scary forest. But you know what? He found his way out because he never gave up. Just like you won't." He made up the story on the spot, weaving a tale of courage and hope. The little girl's face softened, her tears drying as she became lost in his words. For a moment, the bustling market around them faded, replaced by the imaginary forest of Ethan's story. Before long, frantic voices cut through the air. "Emily! Emily!" A man and woman appeared, their faces pale with panic. The little girl's parents had been searching for her, and when they spotted her sitting with Ethan, relief washed over them. They ran to her, scooping her up into their arms. Tears of joy streamed down their faces as they held her tightly, murmuring words of comfort and apologies. The mother turned to Ethan, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much. We were so scared we'd lost her forever. You saved our little girl." Ethan shook his head, embarrassed by the attention. "I just did what anyone would do," he said quietly. The father placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a firm but kind gesture. "No, son. What you did was extraordinary." As they walked away with their daughter, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. He was relieved that the little girl was safe, but the weight of his own struggles quickly settled back on his shoulders. He had spent his last coins on her, and now he had nothing to bring home to his family. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel the sting of despair. But then, in the distance, he noticed someone watching him, a woman seated at the edge of the market. Her posture was slumped, her face hidden beneath dark hair, but her eyes, they were fixed on him with an intensity he couldn't quite place. Unbeknownst to Ethan, this was Harper, a woman whose wealth could buy anything except the one thing she truly longed for: purpose. And in that moment, watching Ethan give everything he had for a stranger, Harper's life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Harper sat silently at the edge of the market, her designer coat draped loosely over her shoulders like an afterthought. She was surrounded by the noise of the bustling crowd, yet her world felt unnervingly quiet. It had been months since she lost her son, and the weight of that grief had settled over her like a suffocating fog. The world she once ruled, a life of luxury, power, and limitless resources, now felt hollow. She had everything money could buy, except the one thing she truly needed: peace. As she watched the boy with the makeshift crutch kneel to comfort the lost child, something stirred within her, a faint flicker of something she hadn't felt in ages. Hope. There was a raw, unpolished beauty in his actions, the way he gave everything he had without hesitation, even though he clearly had so little. Harper had spent her life surrounded by people who took without ever giving. This boy was the opposite. He gave without expecting anything in return. She watched as Ethan limped away after the child's parents had reunited with her, his crutch dragging slightly against the cobblestones. She could see the exhaustion etched into his frame, the weight of the world bearing down on his narrow shoulders. Yet there was something else, a quiet strength that radiated from him, as if life could throw anything at him, and he'd still find a way to stand. Without fully understanding why, Harper found herself following him. Her polished boots clicked softly against the stone path as she trailed at a distance, careful not to be noticed. She didn't have a plan, only a strange compulsion to learn more about the boy who had done so much with so little. Ethan eventually stopped at the edge of the marketplace, leaning heavily on a crumbling wall to catch his breath. The pain in his leg was obvious, but he made no sound, no complaint. Harper hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. "You did something extraordinary back there," she said softly. Ethan turned, startled. His first instinct was to shield himself. After all, kindness from strangers wasn't something he was accustomed to. "I just helped," he replied, his voice cautious but steady. She needed it. Harper studied him for a moment. His clothes were worn, his crutch barely holding together, yet his eyes were sharp, unyielding. They reminded her of someone herself, years ago, before life had stripped away her sense of purpose. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Ethan," he said, eyeing her expensive clothes and immaculate appearance with suspicion. He had seen people like her before, wealthy, untouchable, and indifferent. But something about this woman felt different. "I'm Harper," she said, extending her hand. Ethan hesitated but eventually shook it, his grip firm despite his visible hesitation. "Why did you do it?" she asked, genuinely curious. "You barely had enough for yourself, yet you gave it all away." Ethan shrugged, his gaze dropping to the ground. "Because it was the right thing to do. She needed help more than I did." Harper felt her chest tighten at his words. She had spent years building an empire, accumulating wealth beyond measure, but the boy in front of her, dirty, limping, and tired, had something she had lost long ago. Compassion. Humanity. As they talked, Harper began to learn more about Ethan's life. The landfill he called home, the sick little sister he was desperately trying to save, and the mother who never stopped fighting despite her own frailty. Each word chipped away at the walls Harper had built around herself, and for the first time in months, she felt something close to purpose. "I want to help you," she said suddenly, her voice trembling with emotion. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his skepticism clear. "Why?" he asked. "You don't even know me." Harper hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because I see something in you, Ethan. Strength. Kindness. You remind me of what I've lost, and I think helping you might help me find it again." Ethan studied her, unsure of how to respond. In his world, people didn't just offer help without expecting something in return. But there was something about Harper's sincerity, the way her voice cracked slightly when she spoke, that made him pause. "I don't want charity," he said firmly. "If you want to help, it has to be real." Harper nodded, her expression softening. "Real," she repeated. "No strings attached." In that moment, an unspoken agreement formed between them. Two broken souls, searching for something more. Harper had found a reason to care again, and Ethan, for the first time in a long while, allowed himself to hope. As the days passed, Harper found herself returning to the landfill more often than she ever thought possible. Each visit unraveled another layer of Ethan's life, exposing both the harshness of his reality and the quiet resilience that kept him moving forward. For Ethan, her presence was unexpected, a wealthy stranger stepping into his world of dirt and desperation. At first, he was wary, unsure if her intentions were genuine, but Harper's actions spoke louder than words. She didn't show up empty-handed. On her first visit, Harper brought a small bag of groceries, simple things Ethan's family hadn't seen in weeks. Fresh bread, fruit, and a bottle of milk. "It's not much," she said, handing the bag to him. Ethan hesitated before taking it, his pride battling with the knowledge that his family needed this. "Thank you," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Harper didn't stop there. On another visit, she brought books for Lily, hoping to brighten the little girl's days spent in bed battling her illness. She sat with Maria, listening to stories of their struggles, her polished demeanor softening with each word. Maria was cautious at first, but Harper's genuine curiosity and warmth eventually won her over. For a family used to being invisible to the world, Harper's attention felt like a lifeline. Ethan, however, remained guarded. He wasn't used to relying on anyone, especially not someone like Harper. "Why are you doing this?" he asked one evening, his tone tinged with suspicion. Harper paused, her gaze meeting his. "Because I can, Ethan. And because you've shown me that having everything doesn't mean anything if you're not doing something good with it." The two began to bond in ways neither had anticipated. Harper would often sit with Ethan as he sorted through the trash piles, searching for anything of value to trade at the market. She asked questions about his life, his dreams, questions no one had ever bothered to ask him before. Ethan found himself opening up, talking about the leg he lost in the accident, the sister he was determined to save, and the world he wished for beyond the landfill. One afternoon, Ethan introduced Harper to Tico, a stray dog he had rescued from the landfill's harshness. "He's like me," Ethan said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "A little beat up, but still here." Harper smiled, her heart aching at the raw honesty in his words. Tico became a symbol of their growing friendship, a reminder that even in the bleakest places, hope could take root. Their bond wasn't just about charity or pity. Harper wasn't there to fix Ethan, and he wasn't looking for a savior. Instead, they found in each other what they had been missing. Harper rediscovered a purpose, and Ethan found someone who believed in him, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. For the first time in years, laughter echoed through the tiny shack as Harper joined the family for a simple meal. They shared stories, jokes, and a moment of normalcy that felt like a miracle in their world. As the sun set over the landfill that evening, the lines between their lives blurred, and a new kind of family began to take shape. Harper left that night with a new resolve. She couldn't change Ethan's past, but she could help shape his future. And for Ethan, Harper's visits weren't just acts of kindness. They were a reminder that maybe, just maybe, life had more to offer than what he had been given so far. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the landfill, casting long shadows across the mountains of garbage, Ethan stumbled upon a heartbreaking sight, a small, trembling dog huddled near a pile of rusted cans. The dog's fur was matted with dirt, its ribs visible beneath its skin, and its eyes held a mix of fear and exhaustion. It was a reflection of the very struggle Ethan knew all too well. He crouched down, his crutch wobbling slightly as he steadied himself. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice soft and soothing. The dog flinched at first, its body instinctively shrinking away from contact, but Ethan didn't give up. He tore a piece of bread from the loaf Harper had brought during her last visit and held it out. "You hungry?" he asked gently. The dog hesitated, sniffed the air, and then cautiously moved forward, snatching the bread before retreating a few steps to eat it. Ethan smiled faintly. "Looks like you're a fighter too," he murmured, watching the dog devour the small offering. It wasn't much, but to the dog, and to Ethan, it was a start. That night, Ethan brought the dog back to the shack, cradling it carefully as he navigated the uneven terrain. "Mom, look who I found," he said, his voice carrying a rare hint of excitement. Maria, initially hesitant, sighed as she saw the determination in her son's eyes. "Ethan, we barely have enough for ourselves," she said, but her tone was gentle, knowing full well that Ethan wouldn't take no for an answer. "I'll take care of him," Ethan promised, already searching for a name. "Tico," he decided after a moment. "He's scrappy just like us." Over the next few days, Ethan poured what little resources they had into nursing Tico back to health. He used warm water to clean the dog's wounds, improvised bandages from old cloth, and shared what little food he could spare. The dog, once wary and timid, began to warm up to him, its tail wagging faintly whenever Ethan approached. Tico wasn't just a stray anymore. He was family. When Harper arrived for her next visit, she found Ethan sitting outside the shack, gently brushing Tico's now slightly cleaner fur. "Who's this?" she asked, kneeling to scratch behind the dog's ears. Ethan grinned, a rare sight that caught Harper off guard. "This is Tico. He's one of us now." Harper felt a lump in her throat as she watched the interaction. There was something profoundly moving about Ethan's ability to give, even when he had so little. "You have a way of finding things worth saving," she said softly, more to herself than to Ethan. Tico quickly became a symbol of resilience and hope, not just for Ethan, but for the entire family. The once frightened dog now followed Ethan everywhere, his loyalty unwavering. Tico's presence brought an unexpected warmth to their days, his playful antics coaxing smiles from even the most somber moments. For Lily, who was often too weak to leave her bed. Tico became a source of comfort, curling up beside her and resting his head on her lap as if to guard her from the world. Ethan's bond with Tico also deepened his connection with Harper. One afternoon, as they sat together watching Tico chase a scrap of cloth Ethan had tied to a stick, Harper turned to him and said, "You know, Tico isn't just lucky to have you. You're lucky to have him too." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "He reminds me that even when things seem impossible, there's always something worth fighting for." In a place as unforgiving as the landfill, Tico's presence was a beacon of light. He wasn't just a pet. He was a reminder that, even in the darkest circumstances, love and loyalty could flourish. For Ethan, Tico wasn't just a dog he had rescued. He was proof that, despite everything life had thrown at him, he still had the power to protect and to heal. And in caring for Tico, Ethan began to see the possibility of a brighter future, not just for the dog, but for himself and everyone he loved. One afternoon, Harper arrived at the landfill carrying something more than groceries and books. Her demeanor was different, nervous, almost hesitant, as if she were about to propose something monumental. Ethan noticed it immediately. She wasn't the type to fidget, but today, her hands clutched her bag a little tighter, her gaze darting around as though searching for the right words. Ethan was sitting outside the shack, tossing a scrap of cloth for Tico to chase. His crutch rested nearby, and for once, he looked at ease, a small smile playing on his lips as Tico bounded after the makeshift toy. Harper hated to disturb the rare moment of peace, but knew she couldn't hold back any longer. "Ethan," she began, her voice softer than usual, "can we talk for a minute?" Ethan straightened, sensing the weight behind her words. "Sure," he replied, brushing the dirt from his hands. "What's up?" Harper took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the straps of her bag. "I've been thinking a lot about you and your family, about what you've been through and what you deserve, and I want to help in a bigger way." Ethan tilted his head, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "You already help," he said cautiously. "The food, the books. It's more than enough." "It's not enough," Harper interrupted, her tone firm but laced with emotion. "You're surviving, Ethan, but you're not living, and neither is your family. I want to offer you something that could change that." Ethan remained silent, his guard immediately going up. Offers like these often came with strings attached, and he had learned the hard way not to trust too easily. "What kind of offer?" he asked, his voice steady but wary. Harper hesitated for a moment, then continued. "There's a house," she said, "not far from here. It's small, but it's clean, safe, and warm. I want to give it to you and your family. A place where Lily can rest without worrying about the cold, where Maria can finally breathe without the weight of this place crushing her. A real home." The words hung in the air like a lifeline, but Ethan didn't grab it immediately. His eyes narrowed, scanning Harper's face for any hint of pity or condescension. "Why would you do that for us?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. "We're not your responsibility." Harper knelt down to his level, her eyes meeting his with an honesty that disarmed him. "Because you've reminded me of something I lost a long time ago," she said. "You've shown me what courage looks like, Ethan, and I have the means to help. I want to do this, not out of charity, but because I believe in you." Ethan looked away, his jaw tightening. The offer was almost too much to process. He thought of Lily, her tiny body shivering in the nights, and Maria, whose health seemed to worsen with every passing day. He thought of himself, the endless cycle of scavenging and scraping by, never daring to dream of anything more. The idea of a real home felt like a fantasy, something meant for other people, not him. "I don't want to owe anyone," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You won't," Harper replied, her voice steady but gentle. "This isn't about debts or obligations. This is about giving you a chance, a real chance, to live, not just survive." Ethan was silent for a long time, his mind racing. He thought of all the times he had promised Lily that things would get better, all the nights Maria had cried quietly, thinking he didn't hear. Finally, he nodded, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Okay," he said. "We'll talk about it." Harper's face broke into a smile, her relief palpable. "Thank you," she said, standing up. "We'll make this work, Ethan. I promise." For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a life beyond the landfill. A life where Lily could laugh without coughing, where Maria could rest without worry, and where he could finally breathe without the weight of the world on his shoulders. It wasn't just a house Harper was offering. It was hope. And for Ethan, hope was worth everything. The day Harper took Ethan and his family to see the house felt like stepping into another world. The building wasn't extravagant, but to them, it might as well have been a palace. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood, the house had walls that weren't patched with tarps, windows that weren't broken, and a roof that didn't leak with every drop of rain. The sunlight poured into every corner, as if welcoming them to a life they had only dreamed of. Ethan stood at the doorway, clutching his crutch, hesitant to step inside. Behind him, Maria held Lily in her arms, her eyes wide with disbelief. This can't be for us," Maria whispered, her voice trembling. Lily, too weak to speak, rested her head on her mother's shoulder, her big eyes taking in the sight. Harper placed a gentle hand on Maria's arm. "It's yours," she said firmly. "No strings, no conditions. A place where you can rebuild." As they walked through the house, each step seemed to melt away a layer of doubt. The walls were freshly painted, the kitchen had shelves ready to be filled, and the small living room felt cozy in a way their shack never could. Ethan touched the wall with his hand, as if needing to confirm it was real. He glanced at Harper, his voice barely audible. "It's too much. It's just enough," Harper replied, her smile warm but unwavering. "You've spent too long living with less than you deserve." Maria's tears flowed freely now. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, holding Lily close. Harper shook her head. "You don't need to. Just promise me you'll let yourselves be happy here." Ethan finally walked into the room that would become his. It was simple, a small bed, a wooden desk, and a window that overlooked a patch of grass. He placed his crutch against the wall and sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress firm and supportive in a way he wasn't used to. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, yet welcome: security. As the family began to settle in, Harper didn't just disappear. She stayed, rolling up her sleeves and helping where she could. She brought over paintbrushes, eager to let the family choose their own colors for the walls. "This is your home," she said. "Make it feel like yours." Ethan surprised even himself by suggesting colors: a soft green for the living room, a pale yellow for Lily's room. Harper listened attentively, respecting every choice as if it were her own. Together, they painted, laughed at the messes they made, and shared meals in the small but inviting kitchen. For the first time in years, the air was filled with more than survival. It was filled with hope, joy, and dreams. Tico, ever the loyal companion, found his place in the new home as well. He curled up by the couch, his tail wagging whenever Lily reached out to pet him. To Ethan, Tico symbolized their journey, proof that they had overcome so much and had so much more to look forward to. Harper continued to visit, bringing not just food and gifts, but also stories and books to ignite their imaginations. She and Ethan would sit in the living room, flipping through pages and sharing tales of far-off places. "Every book is a door," Harper said one evening, handing him a novel. "And you, Ethan, can walk through as many doors as you want." The house wasn't just a structure of walls and a roof. It was a foundation for a new chapter in their lives. Ethan began to dream again, not just about surviving but thriving. He imagined a future where Lily would run and play without coughing, where Maria would smile without worry, and where he could build something greater for them all. As Harper left that evening, Ethan stood at the door, watching her walk away. "Harper," he called, stopping her in her tracks. She turned, her expression curious. "Thank you," he said, his voice strong and steady. "For everything." Harper smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "You don't need to thank me, Ethan. Just promise me one thing. Never stop believing in what you can do." Ethan nodded, clutching the doorway as he watched her leave. For the first time, the future didn't seem like a daunting shadow. It seemed like a blank canvas, waiting for him to fill it with all the colors he could imagine. And this time, he knew he wasn't painting it alone. Life in the new home didn't just change Ethan's family's circumstances, it transformed their spirits. The once crumbling shack of the landfill was now a distant memory, replaced by a house filled with laughter, light, and love. Every corner of their new space held a story of their resilience, their journey, and the kindness that had brought them here. For Lily, the change was almost miraculous. With proper rest, warmth, and medication, her strength slowly began to return. Her laughter, once rare and strained, now filled the rooms like music. She spent her days playing with Tico, the faithful dog who had become a symbol of the family's perseverance. Whenever Harper visited, Lily would greet her with stories about Tico's antics or the books she had been reading, books that Harper had carefully chosen to inspire her young mind. Maria, too, was finding a new rhythm. The weight of survival had lifted, allowing her to rediscover parts of herself that had been buried under years of hardship. She began to cook meals again, filling the house with the comforting aromas of home. Her cough, once a constant reminder of her fragility, had softened. "I feel like I can breathe here," she told Harper during one of her visits. "Not just physically, but in my soul." But the biggest transformation was in Ethan. The boy who once navigated the landfill with quiet determination now carried himself with a newfound confidence. He still used his crutch, but there was a lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. Harper had introduced him to books about the world beyond the landfill, sparking dreams he hadn't dared to entertain. Ethan devoured every page, his mind racing with possibilities. "I want to build something," he told Harper one afternoon. "Something that matters." Harper nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "You've already built so much, Ethan. Your strength, your heart, that's your foundation. Everything else will come." Ethan began sharing his knowledge with the kids from the landfill who still came to visit him. He taught them the stories he'd learned from Harper's books, turning their world of discarded objects into castles, forests, and galaxies far away. "You can dream too," he'd tell them, "even here." For Harper, the transformation in Ethan and his family wasn't just inspiring, it was healing. The grief she had carried for her lost son began to shift into something softer, something filled with purpose. She became more than just a benefactor. She became part of their family. She would join Maria in the kitchen, learning how to cook meals that reminded her of the simplicity she had forgotten in her life of excess. She'd sit with Lily, helping her draw pictures of the adventures she dreamed of having. And with Ethan, she found herself believing in possibilities she had long stopped considering. One evening, as the family gathered around the small table for dinner, Harper felt something she hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. Ethan noticed her quiet smile and asked, "What's on your mind?" Harper looked at him, at Maria, at Lily, and finally at Tico, who lay curled up under the table. "You," she said simply. "All of you. You've given me something I didn't know I needed." Maria reached across the table, placing her hand over Harper's. "And you've given us more than we ever imagined possible," she said, her voice steady with gratitude. The connection between them went beyond charity or circumstance. It was a bond forged through shared struggles and triumphs, a reminder that even the most broken lives could be mended through love and understanding. Ethan glanced around the room, taking it all in. The warmth of the lights, the sound of Lily's giggles, the aroma of food that filled the air. For the first time, he didn't feel like he had to fight the world alone. They were all in this together. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who had come to mean everything to him, Ethan realized something. The future wasn't just something to fear. It was something to build. This wasn't just a new beginning for him and his family. It was the start of something greater. Proof that even in the darkest places, light could always find its way in. Months turned into seasons, and the once-forgotten family at the landfill became a story of resilience and transformation that inspired everyone who heard it. Ethan's new home wasn't just a place to live. It was a foundation for something greater. With each passing day, He grew into a leader, a symbol of what determination and kindness could achieve even in the face of unimaginable adversity. Harper continued to be part of their journey, not as a benefactor, but as a friend and an integral part of their newfound family. She often joked that she had learned more from Ethan than she had ever taught him. "You're the one with the real strength," she said one afternoon as they sat in the sunlight painting an old piece of furniture. Ethan grinned, his confidence now a quiet but steady flame. "Maybe, but I think we both needed this." The family story spread quietly but powerfully. Neighbors began to notice the small acts of kindness Ethan performed without a second thought. Fixing a broken toy for a child, helping someone carry groceries, or simply sharing the wisdom he'd gathered from books Harper had given him. His generosity was contagious. Slowly, the community around them began to change, mirroring the hope Ethan had brought into his own life. Lily, now healthier and more vibrant than anyone could have imagined, started school. She carried with her the same light that had once been buried under illness and hardship. "I want to be like Ethan," she told Harper one day, clutching her backpack. "I want to help people too." Harper hugged her tightly, tears welling in her eyes. "You already are, Lily." Maria, who had once seemed weighed down by the struggles of survival, found a new purpose in helping others. She started volunteering at a local shelter, sharing her story with women who felt like the world had forgotten them. If we could find a way out, she would tell them, "You can too." Her words carried the kind of strength that could only come from someone who had lived through the darkness and emerged stronger. For Ethan, the journey was far from over. He had dreams now, big ones. He wanted to build a community center where kids from the landfill and beyond could come to learn, play, and imagine a future outside the confines of their circumstances. "We can't change where we come from," he often said, "but we can decide where we're going." With Harper's support and the connections she helped him forge, Ethan began taking the first steps toward making his vision a reality. He stood on a stage one day, a makeshift platform at a community event, and spoke to a crowd about his journey. His voice, once quiet and hesitant, now carried the weight of his conviction. "I was told that I'd never get out of the landfill," he said. "But here I am, and I'm here to tell you that no matter how dark it seems, there's always light if you're willing to find it, or create it." The crowd erupted into applause, but Ethan's eyes found Harper in the sea of faces. She was smiling, her hands clasped over her heart. It was the kind of smile that said, "I knew you could do it." As the sun set that evening, Ethan, Harper, Maria, Lily, and Tico stood together outside their home. The sky was painted in hues of orange and gold, as if the universe itself was celebrating their journey. Ethan looked around at the people who had become his family, his strength, his reason to believe in something better. "I used to think the landfill was my whole world," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of his past and the promise of his future. "But now I know the world is so much bigger, and it's ours to shape." Harper placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice filled with pride. "And you, Ethan, have already shaped mine." The family stood there in the fading light, not as victims of circumstance, but as proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples that transformed lives. And in that moment, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving, together, as a legacy of hope for anyone who dared to dream.